Welcome to R23D, my name is Alan, and in this week's video I'll be painting this marvellous sculpt of TankGirl by the Patreon of MCM3D. MCM makes some wonderful sculpts and their Patreon is actually really affordable. You should totally check them out. I'll leave a link in the description below. Now, as usual with a new project, I begin by working on the base so that I've got something to put the rest of the model on without damaging it. This base has a really nice key on it to safely support the model. I began by spraying the whole model with a Vallejo primer black, and then the tank turret and boots were given a first pass with Pro Acryl black brown, and then a layer of hull red to give it a bit of colour variance. I then applied a thin layer of Army Painter Dungeon Grey for a dusty look before adding a layer of sand primer and earth brown to give it that dusty appearance. I used Vallejo's hull red to add some shadow and dirt areas to the turret and to simulate rusty water running down the tank from wear and tear and just general grime. It also helps to ground the parts that join onto the tank and give them a real world appearance. I then masked off the twin gun barrels and wrapped thin masking tape around them in order to spray a twisted pattern over them. I used Vallejo's Stonewall Grey for this effect. This can be knocked back a bit later if you feel it looks too bright and quite easily. For her socks I used Deck Tan to give them a nice couple of layers to make them look nice and thick and even. I gave the bootlaces a layer of black, and afterwards they will get knocked back a bit with a layer of dirt and grime to make them blend in a bit better. I then painted the RPG that TankGirl has with a combination of hull red for the wooden areas and Vallejo gunmetal and black for the metal parts. I painted the wood parts in the direction that wood grain would naturally occur, so that the paintbrush strokes left organic looking wood grain marks when it dried. The metal parts, painted with the gunmetal, added a really nice metallic effect to the body of the weapon. For the attached rocket I used a US dark green paint by Vallejo, and that will get a contrast pass later. I gave the boots, socks and RPG a shade pass with Citadel's Nuln Oil, which is really good for adding shadow and dark areas to any colour, as it's purely a shade paint and has no real colour of its own. I airbrushed it into all the little nooks and crannies of the model parts. I then used an old toothbrush to flick dirt over the parts and wanted it to grime it up with Vallejo earth and sand primer. There's a marking on the side of the tank that's in a lot of reference pics, and I decided to mask it off and recreate it for this project. Here you'll see me painting the bloody red and Deck Tan with masking tape to help me get straight lines. For the other half of the marking I used a deep midnight purple and then freehand drew a 5-pointed star to fill in with the bloody red. The outer circle I filled in with black and then went over the whole lot with a rusty dirt pass of hull red to tone it down. I gave it a dirt pass over that to help it make it look like it had been painted years ago. For a tank to look well worn, it has to have edge wear and tear. For this I used chainmail silver and edge painted the bolts, edges and anything I could think of that might have got the paint wore off it with everyday use. I used this same colour to add wear to the RPG. Well, we're getting on quite well now, we're at the skin tone part already. And for the start of this I painted TankGirl with a zenithal highlight of Vallejo white to simulate the light hitting her skin. I painted all the skin parts in the helmet the same pass. The first step in the skin process is to paint the underlayers that will influence the skin tones. I start with a Warlord purple biased towards a high angle. This is followed by an application of transparent red from a low angle to emphasise the shadowy, more darker skin areas. You can see here that I'm spraying the transparent red into all the dark, shadowy areas of the skin. These will show through when the basic skin tones are applied later. The first of the skin tones is next, with a thin layer of basic skin tone applied mostly from a high angle. You want to cover the skin areas in a fairly light application so that the underparts still show through, otherwise the underlayers will have no effect. You can see here that I apply some skin tone to the back of her legs, but it's really only a very thin layer to accompany the later layers that will go over this. Next up is the lighter skin shade of Vallejo's Prue Pink, a shade that I always have trouble pronouncing, Prue Pink. This is later applied from high angles to help lighten the skin shades. This is applied only from the high angles to help lighten the skin areas. You want to just apply light passes and multiple passes, as it's easier to underdo a pass than fix an over application later. Orcish Dermis is next, if you can find it. I'm fortunate that I have some, but I realise it's hard to find sometimes. Vallejo Rose is a close equivalent if mixed with a small amount of transparent red. It can produce similar results. This is applied from a low angle into the shadowy areas. The final light skin tone is next, with a finer application of Vallejo's Light Flesh. This is from a high angle and in thin layers. I applied a final skin shade of Brown Rose to darken the shadow areas and alter the skin tone lightly. I followed that up with a highly diluted application of transparent yellow just to knock back the pink in her skin tone just a bit. You have to be careful with this one though, because any overspray with this and you're looking at starting again. I used Army Painter's Necromancer Cloak Grey for the body armour sections of her outfit, and then sprayed a layer of Vallejo Satin Varnish over the skin areas to protect them from dirt, thumbprints and general paint mistakes. I masked off TankGirl Stockings on one leg and gave it an application of Vallejo's Beastie Brown and let that dry, and then highlighted it with the same paint but with some white mixed in to lighten the shade. For the denim parts of her outfit, I used a mix of Vallejo's Abyssal Turquoise and Azure Blue. It was a close approximation, but you're free to use whatever you think is close to a base colour for denim. I then masked off the skin areas to apply a lighter worn denim colour to the edge parts that were close to her body. I really didn't want any of the blue getting on her skin, as even with the varnish in place it would still be tricky to fix. I then added white to the denim combo and painted the border areas. I then painted her belt with Vallejo's Hull Red. Her belt doesn't seem to be of much use, to be honest. It's not helping to hold anything up by the looks of it. It's very odd. I then went over the denim parts with a dry brush layer of Vallejo Phantom Grey and white, and I did many thin passes to build up to the desired look. I'm just looking to hit all the high ridge points on the model with the edge of the brush just to pick out, it helps define them as worn areas and they look nice and light. Next up was an application of Vallejo Black to her undergarments, being very careful not to get any on her skin. It was quite tricky to get the paintbrush in under the denim shorts and not get paint where it shouldn't go, as this is all one part of the model. I broke out one of my favourite paints next with Molotov's Chrome Silver to paint her dog tag's various clasps and fasteners. This stuff is excellent and goes on in one application and always gives a great shiny finish. Then it was on to my other favourite metal paint finish, Decocolor Gold. This, just like the Molotov, is a pleasure to use and produces a really nice shiny gold finish. To get the desired finish on the denim, I gave it a matte varnish spray and it produced a really nice finish that I was quite happy with. I painted her top with Deck Tan and I thought it looked a bit too bright if it was just white, so I had to be very careful painting underneath the jacket, as this is all one part of the model again and you can't get too close inside some of the crevices. Ideally I'd like to have that being separated, but it is what it is. Back to the body armour now and the Necromancer Cloak Grey. I painted her spike collar and elbow pad with it, and then painted her leg strap for her shooter and a nice shade of Hull Red, which looks nice on the leather when it dries. A quick dab of black for her garter strap, and then it's back on the Molotov Chrome for the clasps. Back to her shooty shooter, and I used the Hull Red again, same as on the leg strap. TankGirl has a length of rope on her waist, and I gave it a base shade of khaki before going over it with contrast paint to help give it some worn rope look. The contrast paint in question being Gilman Flesh from Citadel. I finished off the rope with a nice dry brush over the highlighted edges with Vallejo Cam Grey Green. For the hand grenades on her belt, I started with a base of Vallejo Black Green and then gave the bare metal parts a quick dusting with gunmetal silver. For the parts that are going to be light coloured, I gave them a base of white before painting the yellow and bloody red on top. This is because yellow and red really don't apply very well over the top of the dark green, so in order to make them stand out and pop, I had to paint them white first. Teddy is next. He got a simple finish of Vallejo red leather over a zenithal base, and then a quick dab of black for his eyes and an outline for his mouth of salmon rose. And then for our army helmet I used a military style paint, Vallejo's US dark green, and a couple of applications over the whole thing. I gave the areas where the straps go around it a darker shade of black green. For her gloves I used a simple Vallejo black and then deco colour gold for the bangles on the wrist, and a Molotow chrome silver for the armband spikes. I painted the arm bandage with a deck tan and another familiar one for me, Tamiya X27 clear red for the blood effects on her arm. This is painted on with quite a dry brush, so it looks like it's seeping through from the inside. I love the attention to detail in this model, and one such example is the modelled in fingernails, which I gave a quick dab with Vallejo light flesh. I always planned on making the goggle glass look realistic, so I painted the lenses with gloss black. I'll explain why later on. I used the usual deco colour gold for the bullets on her helmet and also for the surrounds around her goggles. To differentiate the helmet straps on the helmet itself, I painted them with a darker US green and pale green mixed together, both by Vallejo. The chin strap over the peak of the helmet I painted with burnt umber brown to break up all the green mass. I went for a slightly off-white for the cigarette pack, this time Army Painter's Brain Matter Beige. This will also double as a base layer for the red that then goes on top. Remember from earlier when I talked about the glass lenses? Here you'll see I use Green Stuff World's clear UV resin. By dropping just a small amount onto each lens and then pushing it into the corner with a little cocktail stick, I was able to get it to settle in flat and then cured the resin with a UV pen. I think it works pretty neat and it looks like glass, to be honest. And for TankGirl's favourite brand, I painted the pack with a red circle of Vallejo's Bloody Red and used the same red for the Love Heart badge on the front of the helmet. I then finished off the pack with detailing in black and metallic rust, both by Vallejo. TankGirl has a long glove thing on her forearm, and I initially painted it in a dark grey, only to see that it was actually a much paler grey, so I went back over it with Vallejo Stonewall grey, and then dry brushed the body armour parts with Army Painter Dungeon Grey just to add some detailing. Her bunny ears are basically white, but I didn't want to paint them plain white, so I used again the Brain Matter Beige off-white. I painted the pistol in her pocket a nice steel silver and monster brown for the wooden inlay parts. For the rope around her neck, I painted it the same colour as the rope that will go around her back, namely Vallejo Cam Medium Brown. Back to the ears now, and I finished them off with a nice bright hot squid pink colour. TankGirl carries a rather large rocket on her back, strong girl. And this got a base of Vallejo white, and then painted the nose cone and tail fins with a nice shade of Signal Red, which is a metallic red by Vallejo. Now, in order to get nice clean delineation between the colourful parts of the rocket, I actually sliced them into 3 sections in Lychee Slicer using the slice command. The black and white checkerboard sections here I masked off and painted Vallejo black into the squares, and then touched up little bits that needed to afterwards with the white. Now, this model actually comes with a whole set of graphics that you can print off at home on your printer onto a decal sheet and then apply. But not only do I not have a decent printer, but I also fancied that I could probably just draw them on myself. So I used a 0.3mm pen and then drew the tattoos on TankGirl's skin. I won't lie, I was a bit nervous about this because there's one wrong move and I'd be looking at painting the skin again, so I had to tread carefully. However, I think they turned out nice, and once they were all done, I sealed them in with a layer of satin varnish to help protect them. There are a couple of, shall we say, interestingly placed roundels on TankGirl's top, and I again opted to hand paint these as I wasn't too keen on trying to fit a decal to fit over a complex curve. I painted the roundels with bloody red for the red parts, funnily enough, and dark imperial blue for the outer part. I then painted over any errors in it with deck tan to get it back to the colour of her top. One of the more interesting tattoos on her is actually Kermit the Frog. I painted the base of this with white and then painted green on top and outlined it then with the black pen in the end. For her hair, which is a base of blonde, I didn't really have a blonde paint in my library of paints, so I used Prue Pink, which is a skin tone by Vallejo, and added a hint of transparent yellow and mixed it until I was happy with how it looked. The highlights for her hair were a combination of squid pink and ink tensity lime green. I painted her teeth, which are partially hidden so would be darker than normal, brain matter beige, as they would look more natural than pure white, and I used that for the eyes and for her cigarette as well. I then used the same squid pink for her lip colour, and I later added a thin layer of Magos Purple by Citadel to darken them down a bit and give it a bit more attitude. I have a special paintbrush that I like to use for painting very fine detail. They're really cheap and meant for painting nails. I'll actually leave a link in the description below where I got them on Amazon. I painted her eyebrows with a Vallejo red leather in very fine strokes. I then painted the eyes and lashes with a simple black from Vallejo and added eyeshadow in the form of UK Azure Blue. The sclera of the eye I painted with Brain Matter Beige, which is an off-white, and the iris was a Vallejo Deep Sky Blue. I then added a little dab of black for the pupil and added a little spot of pure white for a specular highlight on her eyes. And then I went on to add the eye black under each eye with a detail pen that I used for the tattoos, and I'm calling it done. Wait a minute, not so fast. I've got one last thing I want to add just for myself. I like to add a little personal touch to the bits in my projects, and this one was no different. So I took one of her lower leg parts into a 3D package and sliced off her upper leg and added some wheels, and ta-da! Roller skates. Now, some of you have been following me will know that there's been a fairly lengthy time gap between Doom Guy project and this one, and I apologise for that, but there have been some incredibly difficult things happening recently and I haven't been able to dedicate the time that I would like to the channel. I do want to thank everyone who has left comments though, and the lovely likes and subscribers. It's been very much appreciated and certainly not something I take for granted. I'd also like to thank Funcrecol for supplying the resin for this project and believing in the channel. Thanks very much guys. So it only remains for me to say, this has been R2-3D and I'll see you in the next one.
Queen of the wasteland, where's that crown? Tank girl, down and through the night, living on the edge, ready for a fight. She's got a fire and no one can see, a wild heart racing forever free. With a rebel yell, she shatters the calm, a storm in her soul, she's on with the charm. Dreams make the wall she loves, with every battle scar she wears them like gloves. Tank girl, roaring in the dark, fueling the flames.